obviously impacting everyone's lives.
Well, I brought the books with me.
Okay.
And that little dedication to Nikola Tesla on his birthday, of course, came out of your book Weather Wars, which is extraordinary and is worth a show all to itself. But this is your latest book, The Angel Wars, yes?
It is, and in Angel Wars, I've taken 35 years of investigating the history, the myth, the legends of the wars in the heavens. It doesn't matter if you start with the recorded history of mankind, or at least that which they allow us to know about. You'll find that in every single instant, in every single country of the world, their legends always talk about the heavenly beings or the star people or the angels, whatever they're called in their local language, that come to Earth, not only teaching mankind all of the different hidden arts, the mysteries, the sciences, but also going to war with mankind. And it's something that is too formidable a subject just to avoid in any way, shape, or form.
It really is, and the thing is that it repeats and it repeats and it repeats. It's like the universe wastes nothing, and everything is cyclical. And as we go through our visit tonight, it'll be, here he is, it's Solomon. The thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun, and that's just how it is, isn't it?
Right, and this is the critical thing, and I hope we can cover it. This is the key to understanding why all of the forbidden archaeology, all the true facts in history have been hidden. Because in order to understand the present and to go directly to what we're going to be dealing with in the future, the keys lie in the past. So if you control the past, in essence, you control the future. So we've always heard, well, if these things are real, where are the bones? For instance, when I write about giants, people will say, well, they'd be in the Smithsonian. Now the Smithsonian's involved in probably one of the greatest archaeological cover-ups in the history of the world. The major governments of the world have cut deals with the U.S. government. We buy their silence with fabulous amounts of money. And now that the money is going to stop flowing, I believe the information is going to be there for the knowing as more and more people, and especially governments, break with official U.S. policy. So disclosure is going to take place more in the ancient realm as well as the alien or the heavenly realm. And so it's just as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. But then when you start to deal with the sun and the sun's importance in history, obviously without the sun we all die. And I tell people that now we're seeing the solar anomalies. We're seeing all of the different SOHO, the solar observatory and the helioscopic observatory. In other words, satellites that do nothing but watch the sun until something important comes that the government doesn't want us to know about. The reason, again, that we don't see what everybody wants to see in order to quote-unquote believe is because in controlling the data and information flow, basically we become robots and we become vulnerable to whatever spin they put on us. So in the book Angel Wars, Past, Present, and Future, I have the subtitle, as you know, No Flesh Left Alive. And you can't get away from the historic desire of entities. Obviously, the Bible talks about the devil and his angels fighting against Michael and his angels, but the desire of man in rebellion against God to create a better man, an Ubermensch, a Superman, if you will, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, their super soldier. It's basically, John, God didn't do a good enough job, and now we're going to take our limited knowledge or our egotistical knowledge, and we're going to do something better. We're going to make a Superman, and I think we're only going to make super monsters, and unfortunately they have an appetite for human flesh, just as their ancient ancestors.
You know, I got an email a while ago, and do you find that are you accused of being a fundamentalist often?
I'm not a fundamentalist. That's interesting because the fundamentalists get mad at me. A fundamentalist basically doesn't accept the fact, most of them don't accept the fact, that prior to the creation of Adam and Eve, which I believe is literally 6,000 years old, but prior to that, the golden age, I would say this, whoever accuses me of that only does so because I'm not ashamed of Jesus. But as far as fundamentalists go, I would say they would not be very happy. I tell people I'm one quote-unquote Christian who has done my homework, and can talk about the things that most Christians don't want to talk about. I talk about things that most of them are afraid to talk about, and in so doing, if we can provide answers to people and they see that what an amazing, amazing amount of revelation is in the ancient texts of the Old Testament, the current text, the New Testament. Good example. Just because I quote Jesus, most fundamentalists don't even follow what Jesus said. So what they're looking for is basically, if you will, a box, and they want people to understand that in the box. Now, I'm not taking away anything from their position, but to call me a fundamentalist, I think, is basically a lack of understanding what it is. And if you cannot talk even on a basic term without name-calling, the ad hominem text, obviously, when you talk about Jesus, you talk about the God of the Bible, the attacks come almost incessantly. And again, we're in a spiritual battle, and there really are bad people. There really are fallen angels. People, when you and I will do a show, or George Norrie and I do a show, I'll get people that are, upset that anyone would even think that angels exist. Yet they believe in UFOs, and they believe in the Space Brothers. So I would say this: I am the quintessential opposite of a fundamentalist, but I do believe that the Bible is specifically given to mankind to reveal the heart of God to the limited basis that a finite being can understand the infinite nature of the living, loving God. And so I'm excited about Jesus. Jesus said something, just as in the days of Noah, so would it be in the coming of the Son of Man, the days leading up to the coming Son of Man. Unfortunately, most people don't even know what that means, and they're starting to get a feel for it because even the earth changes and all of the disruption in the weather and all of the different vehicles of torment and terror that are taking place. I believe there is a sinister malevolence behind those. Obviously, weather wars, you spoke of it. So I hope I've answered that question. I get accused of everything, so that's on the light side.
So do I, but I'm okay with it. It's you get to be my age and you can't annoy somebody or be a little bit flirty or something with others. I'm not doing that with you. You're just plain boring, but I'll go out on a limb far enough to say that I think that organized religion has driven away as many or more people than it's brought into Christianity. And if that's the case, there's something wrong with the church. And I'll tell you what, I would, and there I've said it to millions of people.
Right. Well, again, I agree. I concur. I am to the point of almost, I would say, in many circles, contemptible of organized religion. It doesn't matter Protestant, Catholic, doesn't matter what, because again, any time people don't know the truth or aren't allowed to know the truth or are suppressed or not allowed certain access to, quote, the truth or historic documents or things that would make it uncomfortable for those who want to control people, you, I, others. Look, we can sum up, I'll sum up the totality of what I speak about. It's relationship with Jesus, and Jesus is not the same as Buddha, Muhammad, an avatar, an ascended master. He's the King of Kings, Son of God. People say God has no children. Well, if Solomon's the wisest man in the world that even non-Christians acknowledge had it together, and even the secret orders and the different cults, the secrets of Solomon, etc., stuff attributed to him in his fallen state, he said, tell me, in Proverbs, what is God's name or what is his son's name? The idea of a God who would absolutely give himself for the people's sins instead of having people climb up steps of pyramids, cutting the hearts out of living, breathing victims to appease some demon or demigod. I think it's fascinating to me because, again, everybody is looking at what they can do, and I'll be even a little stronger than you are. I'm in contempt of organized religion at the expense of people. Jesus came and died for people, not an organization, not a church structure, not to perpetuate dogma. He came that people might have life and have it more abundantly. And
Absolutely.
In this day and age, with death surrounding us on every corner, I got news for you. You and I both know that there's a certain peace that comes with that knowledge.
Tell you what, Stephen, let's take a break right now. Otherwise, I'm going to I'd love to just keep rolling here, but let's take one. Otherwise, I'm going to bollocks this up real good. Our guest tonight is Stephen Quayle, and we're going to get into this. So strap in tight. It's not going to be bumpy, but it's going to be real fast. This is Coast to Coast AM. All right, Stephen, take us to the beginnings of evil, if you can. And what I mean by that is, what is evil anyway? Evil is intent to effectively to cause harm, either through subjugation or through just absolute abuse following the subjugation. So now you and I discussed briefly. The thing about it is this is such heady stuff, and it's just all over the place. I'm having trouble finding a beginning, a middle, and an end here because it's all kind of coming at once. But
I think you're correct in saying it's all coming at once. Most people view history, John, as a ruler, a yardstick with, day one, whatever they choose to call day, through the contemporary times. Quantum physics, obviously, and we're not going to get heavy, we're going to try and keep this really basic. Quantum physics easily looks at the surface of a basketball with all the writing on it, and that's on one level, but understanding that which holds the ball together, the air, that which comprises the air, the molecules, atoms, electrons, everything goes into that basketball. So people have to break loose, in my opinion, of looking at everything in a linear world. The pure evil, okay, let's go to free will. It's interesting that in the examples of mythology, and we can go not into every single mythological creature, but in Greek mythology, the central theme is gods and goddesses and fighting against humans, or favoring humans, kind of like Nero would have his favorite gladiators in the Rome. But there's always an element, and this would make the best melodrama. It's not between only good and evil, but it's between the whole realm of creation. What is so unique about mankind that every single recorded incident in history, even the things that are suppressed by the governments of the world, indicate that there was a group of fallen angels. The group of fallen angels were in rebellion against the God, or in their terminology sometimes the gods. The gods fought amongst themselves. I'm just asking people to use the word angels, fallen angels. An angel simply means a messenger. Obviously the Greek word for angel means messenger. A messenger is something that, or someone that carries a message. So if you look at modern men, I get a kick out of this, John, and we talked about this. People think that history, especially mythology, legends, and oral tradition are just absolutely untrue. Yet today's the most sophisticated scientists in the world, and those who are the editors of the most popular magazines in the world, they're talking about the blending of demons, and a demon, for the purpose of conversation tonight, is a disembodied spirit. They're talking about demon machines. They're talking about man who, in the hierarchy of biblical revelation, was created by a living God. We're not a cosmic goo. We're not cosmic soup. We're not an accident. We're not just atoms bumping as strangers in the night. May I give you a quote that's kind of interesting?
Absolutely.
Because this is by Nancy Gibbs, the editor-at-large for Time magazine. Again, what I think, and you and I spoke about this, John, when I spend 35 years and I put 815 footnotes in the book, Angel Wars, and I put 115 illustrations and quote all these people, it doesn't matter if someone says to John or Steve, well, I don't believe that. You're free to make that statement, but your statement is inaccurate as it relates to whether something exists or not due to whether someone believes it or not. Let me give you this. This is in Chapter 18 of my book. It's called Super Soldiers, Terminators, and Demon Machines. I'm quoting her now. As the laboratories incubate new blends of man and machine, the path of progress cuts through the four-way intersection of the moral, medical, religious, and political. And whichever way you turn, you are likely to run over someone's deeply held beliefs, and has revived the oldest of ethical debates over whether scientists were playing God or proving he does not exist because someone reenacted Genesis in suburban Maryland. Nancy Gibbs. Well, again, the joke is that scientists are sitting about bragging around their table how illustrious their brilliance and achievements have come to the point that they can create life, that they can create this and create that, and there is no God until a voice from heaven says to the scientists who are using the very essence of the building blocks of life, get your own dirt, and meaning they can only assemble which has already been created. The infinitesimal minutia of man's arrogance compared to the infinite mercy and grace of the King of Glory, he who speaks the worlds into existence. Notice this, he doesn't test tube it into existence. He doesn't have to buy a molecular assembler to bring it together. You see, there is such a shallow and such a misunderstanding, and I blame that on organized religion, to rob, in my opinion, God of his magnificence.
Well, you know what Carl Jung said? One of the main functions of organized religion is to prevent a person from having a direct experience with God. I'd sort of roll with Carl on that.
Well, I'll roll with him on that. I'd say 99% of the people, 100% of the people need their own relationship. It's interesting, isn't it? Jesus doesn't say you have to crawl 20 miles on your knees with blood-drenched kneecaps to put a little piece of silver on a miracle board. Jesus never said to stand and stare at idols and statues, hoping that somehow they give speech, yet exactly that's what so many of the myths and legends of the world teach. You see, it's always the idea of appeasing an angry God that involves some way or somehow, ultimately, the requirement of human life. The Bible said, and look, here's again, the thing is this, is you can talk, you and I both know this, you can talk about anything you want. It can be any form of perversion, it can be any form of disgusting thing, it can be everything is on there's no limits now on everything that used to be considered morally reprehensible or disgusting. And no matter whose context you put that in, but it's fascinating that the minute you speak the name of Jesus, every attack comes out. And Jesus said this, and you and I spoke about this, marvel not that the whole world hates you, for they hated me without a cause. And so the thing is that there is a supernatural element to evil. And even though the world is coming to it, every single scientific achievement, advancement in the area of transhumanism basically boils down to God didn't do a good job, and we're going to combine men and machines, and we're going to create men, we. It's the arrogance of Lucifer himself saying, I will ascend. You see, men want to be God. They think that because of their ability to control the masses and keep the truth. Jesus said, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But that's based on also the fact that we have to abide in him. The love of God is the most lacking in person and presence. Who talks about it? Well, they say, well, those evangelical Christians. Most evangelical Christians aren't talking about the love of God. Most evangelical Christians aren't representing God as he characterizes himself in his Bible. Listen, the Bible is just a book. Obviously, the prophets, the stories that were written, that were given to Moses on the mountain. He wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
Hang on, Stephen. We got to take a break, and they're going to cut us off. So we'll be back with Stephen Quayle. John B. Wells with you, Coast to Coast AM. We'll roll on after these. We're not selling anything here tonight on Coast to Coast AM. We're never really selling anything. One thing I know for sure, and I don't know much, I don't know the truth. I get a glimpse of it every once in a while. I get a piece of it here and there, but I do know this. The truth is one of those things that does not require our belief in it to exist. When we come back with Stephen Quayle, I want to find out how much explanation there really is with all these winged creatures, human faces on beasts, beast faces on humans, and all these other things that just permeate our history. Hope you'll hang with us for that. This is Coast to Coast AM. John B. in with you tonight. You can send me an email anytime you want at johnb, Johnb, at coasttocoastam.com. Some months ago, I saw a news article. I don't even know how I got there. You click on one, and it takes you to another, and you go to the sidebar, and by the time it's all over with, I wound up at a UK site. And there was a stillborn sheep, and it had the face of a human being on it. And I'm not kidding you either. It was absolutely disturbing. And the people who commented about it and their comments then put into print were a little sheepish about it. I'm sorry it was there, but it's true. Stephen, give us your thoughts on all of these various creatures of various distorted form that appear throughout antiquity and promise to be replaced in future, and we'll get to that later, with more modern, shinier-looking appendages other than the usual horns and tails.
Well, the hidden truths in mythology, especially the Greek mythology, and there are other, again, every single mythological-based belief system deals with this, but the word chimera, some people pronounce it chimera, pronounced chimera, chimera.
Yep.
Obviously, excuse me, John, half animal, half human. Now, there was a time when people said that would never happen. Now, the idea behind it all is to cross the species, which is a direct confrontation against the created boundaries that the God of Genesis said that he created this, everything after its likeness and kind, and said it is good. The idea of trans-species mixing, not only forbidden by God himself, brought about the judgment upon the earth, killing everything and everyone with the exception of 8 people. People don't believe in Noah's flood. But even prior to Noah's flood, the prophet Jeremiah spoke of another flood that predated the creation of mankind on an earth that was in rebellion. Even the myths of Atlantis, by the way, I don't believe they were just not real places. Atlantis was real. Lemuria was real. Mir was real. Shangri-La. All of these different mythical places have a lot of things in common with the face of the human on a sheep. It's at that point that the God, not a demigod, not a demon masquerading who wants to be God, not Lucifer, but they made themselves an image that they could create and they could be on the same level as God, and they made these horrific creatures, whether they were satyrs, whether they were lion men. It's always the DNA. Now, in my book, here's something that most people don't understand. They'll quote the Dead Sea Scrolls, or they'll at least reference them, and much of the Bible that we have, especially in the Old Testament, obviously, a lot came from Qumran, what are called the Dead Sea Scrolls. But two of the most fascinating books out there that deal specifically with the question you're asking me are thousands of years old, and they're on copper scrolls or rolled up in different medium that they've been able to keep together. And that one is called the Book of Giants, which most people don't even know exists, and the Book of Enoch. In the Book of Giants, it said that the fallen angels literally commingled, call it DNA, which obviously it was. They absolutely distorted, perverted, manipulated the DNA of the animals. See, this is something that, again, most Christians are taught, and fundamentalists believe, and I want to make this clear, I believe that the earth was obviously a lot older than 6,000 years ago, and that a pre-Adamic, you'll find this interesting later in the show, but a pre-Adamic civilization of angels and other beings not created in the image of likeness of God were brought forth, and they rebelled, the golden age, if you will. Manetto's Table of Kings, I'm going to throw some stuff out there, the Egyptian antiquity records, they go back tens of thousands of years. The map of the Creator, which is 500,000 years old. So modern Christianity can't account for these time periods in the past. They'll try and make excuses, but the thing is the Word of God doesn't make excuses. It gives the truth, not the total truth, but when it comes to the chimeras, when it comes to the animal-human hybrids, it's interesting that in every single case in the Book of Giants, which is complete, and by the way, the Book of Giants, the word book is a little misleading there because it's fragments, but it's all about the fallen angels messing with every form of animal, every form of insect. Somebody knows, you may swat the flies and call them little the little bees that they are. By the way, the word bastard specifically is a word defined and applied by God in the book of Enoch to the fallen angel's offspring. So that's what it is. It's not just somebody you don't like. The word historically. Now, some people get offended when I use that word. Obviously, I do want people to understand in the context. So as it relates to your question, John, these things were messing around with the DNA, cross-breeding everything, and that's where the monsters of antiquity come in. That's where all the strange stuff comes in. That's where all the giant centipedes, millipedes, insects, birds, dinosaurs, all this stuff come in. And in my opinion, we're going to be there again. That's why it took superheroes / half men, half God, in some cases of mythology, to conquer these things. And so when I talk about genetic Armageddon, today's technology producing tomorrow's monsters, we ain't seen anything yet. And what the boys in the black lab coats, and when I say black, I want to make this clear, that's the secret laboratories of the world that do such horrific experiments that Mengele would be the patron saint of these guys. In other words, they're that sick.
You read my mind about Mengele. Let me tell you what, many people do not know this. You know, there has been, and I know this has been said ad nauseum, but it's true. It's unbelievable what our people, I don't care what color, I don't care. In this regard, absolute color blindness applies. Not only are we being lied to, but these lies are becoming more and more transparent all the time until, of course, the Internet is seized, in which case, well, we'll get to that later. I'm not so sure it's a good idea to run everything over the net, especially with a guy sitting in the Oval Office that can pull the plug on it at any time. Then what? But the amount of knowledge that we're not being taught is absolutely unbelievable. People don't know. Not even the last 100 years of history. Our own president doesn't even know how many states we have. I'm not going to pick on him. He's got his own problems. He's turning gray, and he's done it in 2 years, so he's under a little stress up there. But how do you? Is it only through programs like this that we can get any information out to people? So at least if they don't just swallow it, hook, line, sinker, lock, stock, and barrel, whatever, they can at least go to find the answers to these questions, because this is melding into one big comic book where it's a comic book, so you just take it at face value and you don't take any of it seriously, and in the meantime you're out on the clothesline and you're about to be a victim.
Well, that's exactly what's happening, because victim, I use the word victim in the same sense I think that you mean it. We're about ready to be sacrificed, and when I say sacrificed, I'm talking on the altar of a supernaturally evil plan to destroy mankind in its entirety. That's why I use the second title of my book, actually, not the subtitle, but No Flesh Left Alive, ? Is in direct reference to what Jesus himself said when he said that if the days weren't shortened, there'd be no flesh left alive. This is why all the secret science programs, the vaccinations, the pharmaceuticals, all of the different plans to control and destroy people are on an accelerated basis. Let me put something into perspective, because I think this will explain it in a real simple way. If I might just share one statement, I think this will help people to understand. The goal is not to help humanity be all we can be, to borrow the Army's term, but rather to place those of us living now with a very different creature, to basically create a race of gods, little g's, which will then toss out the old humans, that's you and I, John, who will no longer be useful to have around except perhaps as amusing slaves. If anything, the old-style human beings will be an irritation or a reminder of what the transhumanists once were. You see, you remember the movie, obviously, The Terminator. Remember how Skynet becomes the controlling overlord and self-replicating machines continue to destroy mankind?
Sure.
It's the same thing. It's kind of like CERN and the Stargates out there, and most people don't understand what the purpose of Stargates are. Before the certain point in time, it's like God puts a time lock on hidden mysteries, and at a certain point in time, those time locks are open. Well, I've talked to people through cutouts, because a lot of people can't talk to me because what I'm saying directly, because I don't want to put them in harm's way, and I prefer that I never know any names of people, just the information. Men will tell you what's going on. What's going on will not tell you what the men are doing. So in the basis of human intelligence gathering, that's why the KGB and all of the spy networks, Chinese, CSIS, Chinese, all of the different spy agencies of the world, the ones that lead the field aren't the ones that are technologically perfect like the United States, or what we once were, but the ones that have human people in the field. So God has witnesses, and he has people that are letting his people, i.e. those who are followers and believers and who believe in the redemption, Lord Jesus Christ, warning the people of what's coming. The coming nightmare is so horrific that I lack the words to try and share with people. So by giving the answer to what's going on behind the scenes, it's my desire and my prayer that I can give the antidote for fear. And the antidote for fear is simply knowing that you know this is how it's going to play out. You may not know all the details, but that God in his mercy and love told you that you don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to be afraid of it if you obviously have the ability to overcome it, not in your strength, but in the strength that the promise of the Word of God. Listen, Satan doesn't like this. He knows his time is short. There is war in heaven going on right now. There's war on the earth. And if you notice the anti-Christian bias, it's increasing so greatly that it's almost like seasoning on a plate, or seasoning in a restaurant to serve everyone up on a plate. We've seen this in history before. The reason history repeats itself is because men don't learn from their past mistakes, and they become apathetic and indifferent, and in apathy and indifference, you offer yourself up for slaughter.
You know, it was the great books and the quotations therefrom. Is that a word? No, well, I'm hosting the show, so it's a word tonight. Therefrom. Now it seems to be the great screenwriters, and I don't know if Morpheus out of the Matrix was the first one to say it, but I remember him saying it's one thing to know the path, but it's another thing to walk it. It's difficult to get on that path and stay on it. I want to get your take on something here, because you touched on it a minute ago, but I didn't want to interrupt you. And it is that I got an email a minute ago from a fellow who said, would you ask Mr. Quayle, the God of the Old Testament seems to be a little more harsh than the God of the New Testament. In my mind, I said, well, that's because you have Lord Jesus between you and him. So it's not quite as harsh, but I don't know if I'm even close with that. It's just my initial response to it. Is there a big difference between the harshness of the Old Testament and the more leniency, as it would seem to be, of the New?
Well, the neat thing about the mercy, the love, and the grace of God is it's the bridge between the black and white. I think in my case, and I want to add, that's a great question, by the way, whoever sent that to you. One of the hardest things I had as an early Christian is understanding why God, and here's basically one instance that I never understood until, when you take a look at it face value, God had the children of Israel slay every man, woman, and child that when they went into the promised land. In most instances, there were exceptions to that. And I could never understand why that was the case, John, and I prayed about it, and obviously studied about it. And when you find out that at a certain point everything was corrupt, meaning everything was corrupt, up until the time of Noah, that means when the Bible, the Old Testament says Noah was perfect in his generation, that doesn't mean he was morally perfect. We all know that wasn't the case.
True.
The point is that he was the only untampered with genetic stock. And so it said that God was so grieved that he had made man that it repented him. So the thing is that God builds an ark for Noah and his family. And by the way, years ago, studying the ark, all the supposed locations, actually talking with some of the guys that have been on it in my early Christian years, that's almost 40 years ago, the point that I think the harshness is that, listen, God is not a buddy who you can basically go down to the bar and hammer a few down with. The anthropomorphic distortion, meaning placing mankind's limitations and understanding on he who called it into all all realms of existence. I'm talking quantum realms. I'm talking eternal. So when you look at that, like God destroyed all the men, women, and children, or certain Israelites were commanded to do that, it wasn't because God is the ultimate meanie. It's because they were all corrupt. And had he not given that command and order, there'd be no seed of his creation left. Let me put it this way too. I think this is going to help, and this is the key. This is out of Hidden Truths of Mythology. I'm reading right out of the top of my book. I want to give people an understanding of 35 years of writing. This is 444 pages, and it's totally different in some respects than anything I've written before. And here it is, and I'm going to quote some different people just to put this into context, because that is a valid perception, but if you only understand it on its surface, you don't get to what's underneath. Why did Satan have some of his fallen angels intermarry with human women? Why? Why bother? The reason for this can be understood by investigating the greater context of Genesis. In Genesis 3:15, the first messianic prophecy is recorded. The prophecy declared that the Messiah would be the seed of the woman, and this seed would crush the head of Satan. What is happening in Genesis 6:1-4 is a satanic attempt to corrupt the seed of the woman by having some of his angels take on human form. And I might answer the critics too. That was both before the flood and after the flood. By the way, angels always appear as young males when they take on the human form and intermarry with humankind to try and corrupt the seed. Therefore, the events of Genesis 6:1-4 were a satanic attempt to cancel out the prophecy of Genesis 3:15. That was Arnold Fruchtenbaum, Ph.D. So if you look at this in the context that there is good and evil, how does good, and this is a great question. I fight, and it's truly sometimes a fight with evolutionary biologists. I say, if they say, prove to me there's a God, I give them three words that absolutely prove to me there's a God: free will, love, and laughter. And I want to share this because in a purely biomechanical or a biochemical matrix, you cannot account, if you believe in absolute predeterminism of chemical compounds to bound, because you always have to have an enzyme, you always have to have a catalyst, something outside of that which is created or which exists, for whatever reason, to form it. A lot of pressure, a lot of heat, a lot of this, a lot of that. The very nature of the argument, I've said on Coast to Coast with George before, John, that there's nothing that expresses to me the truer nature of God than love. So the God of the Old Testament was truly harsh. When you understand the barbarism of the Old Testament, and by the way, God, the Hebrew God, the God of the Old Testament, never allowed human sacrifice, and even in the
Hang on, Steve. They're going to cut us off. Hold your thought. Hold on tight. This is Coast to Coast AM. We're coming back. Our guest tonight is Stephen Quayle, and I'll tell you what, got a lot of emails in here. Some of them are pretty good. Some of the questions are really good, and I'll pass them along to Stephen as we go on through. But just for the uninitiated, I don't have to tell you this, but I will anyway, just in case you need to be reminded. Listen with an open mind and have no fear of opening your mind, because there's nothing in the content of tonight's show that will harm you in any way. Most people are predisposed to believe one way or another. Anyway, as individuality slips away, normally I would go ahead and take a little break now so that we could have a nice long run with Stephen, but I think we'll just bring him right back on in. And I got to ask you something, Stephen. What isn't the first step to subjugation the general degradation, beating down, and elimination of the individual, like Patrick McGowan did in his Prisoner series? In other words, they're taking, certain schools are trying to take he and she, him and her, out of the schoolyard language because they don't want any gender bias. Now, in my world, being just exactly like everybody else, this notion of equality is just exactly the same thing as being nobody. So am I on the right track, or have I gone off the trail and off into the ditch?
No, you're bright and astute, and you know exactly what's going on. It's just like the family. God is the ultimate father. Jesus referred to him as my father, your father, the family of God. The family is one of the most unique manifestations on earth of what it means to live and love together and flow together. So with the gender, quote, confusion and the taking away, ultimately it's one more step. You destroy the family. You destroy the procreative ability to reproduce a value. Every value that we have seen destroyed in this country, it's being destroyed by design. And the Communist Manifesto is nothing more than Lucifer's blueprint for destroying the word freedom. It's kind of like Braveheart. Mel Gibson's portrayal of William Wallace was so emotionally provoking because you saw there the attempt to control everything. And this is what the Total Information Awareness Act, I'll even take it one step further. The degradation could be no more pronounced or in the face of American citizens than what the TSA is doing to little old ladies, people with ostomy bags, little children being fondled. And Texas, I wish Texas, I know you live there, John, would be consistent and follow through, because it could set the stage for other things to allow my wife, your wife, our children, my children, to be absolutely fondled, touched inappropriately, when the laws on the books say that that's illegal, shows you that they that are writing the laws and enforcing the laws are using them to absolutely take away the last bit of dignity that we have in this country, and every day it grows worse. Everything we think, do, and say are in the plots and schemes they're trying to control us with today. I'm taking a little takeoff there on Zager and Evans tunes, but we're at a phenomenal, and I say phenomenal, that not in a good sense of the term, but an unusually wicked period where all the boundaries, look, even the boundaries between men and women, what you just described there on the British genderless thing, or the gender attempt to make God an it and not a he, or to make God a she, and she has never been he. Obviously, woman was created out of man. Doesn't mean there weren't other female entities prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. But God said when he created Adam and Eve, he did something different. And this is what I think people have got to understand in biblical basic history, that God himself created woman out of man, not to be put under man, but to be aside him, to be a helper, to be the very vehicle that they share life together. And so now with all of the attempts at feminism, and by the way, feminism and humanism, anytime you hear the word humanism and feminism, if the feminists in this world would stand up for the women who are being abused in Middle Eastern lands and all the horrible things that are done, you'd say maybe there's a different agenda for these virtue supposedly invoking groups that don't do what they do, except they do everything against women or against mankind. So the whole idea of a gender confusion is to do the very thing I believe that you are picking up on. And by the way, feel free to interrupt me at any point, because I wasn't able to hear the background music, and so I want you to understand, John, you're free to interrupt me at any point.
Oh, listen, I do it all the time. I run those breaks so tight sometimes. Sometimes I get chopped off because I just can't stop. But I hate to interrupt you because it's so, well, it's good to listen to. Got to ask you a question here. This is a repeat email, but the email says he is so right. Ask him about the bloodline of Satan on earth. The demons are here through the international bankers, the Rothschild. That seems a little over the top to me, but absolutely nothing surprises me. It really doesn't. Sometimes disappoints me, but doesn't surprise me normally. Any thoughts on that? Or
well, sure. And the listener is referring to, it's not just them, okay? The whole bloodline issue it goes right back to Genesis 3:15. Because Satan does have a seed, and that seed he's injected himself into the human race, and obviously wants to propagate his offspring. And this is what I think people have got to understand. Again, your emailer's really onto something here. I interviewed one of the most powerful illuminists I ever met in my life. He's now dead, so it doesn't matter. It would be no purpose to throw his name out there. But he was raised as a full-scale Luciferian by a very rich Texas oilman, okay? No last names, and there's no assumption to anything that starts with an H, okay? It's not going there. But I'm just saying this, from their inculcation as children, they're taught that Lucifer is the light bringer, okay? Matches used to be called Lucifers. The light bringer that is going to bring mankind out of his bondage to the living God, i.e. we would call him God the Father, or the Hebrew God, I am that I am, not me, but God speaking as he revealed himself to Moses, and that they believe that literally they've been given the divine bloodline. They believe that the control of money, now this is what the listeners really clued in on. If you control the money, Ansel Rothschild made the statement, give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who writes its laws. Then you immediately contrast that with Jesus' words, the love of money is the root of all evil. What are we seeing right now, John, in the control of money? We are seeing the absolute subjugation, destruction, and the end to America's middle class. Someone says, look, that's a little extreme, Steve. No, it's not extreme. These people believe that they are the God-like ones, okay? I will be like the Most High God. They are of their father, the devil. And they openly worship Lucifer. And here's something that I'm not injecting this. I mean, some of these guys who are fabulous researchers have gone in and can show the bloodlines all the way back. They believe, wrongly so, that in nowhere in the Holy Bible does it maintain in any way, shape, or form that Jesus had any offspring physically. He did not have sex with Mary Magdalene and produce a race, if you will, of co-Jesuses throughout Earth. Now, there were people on the earth who claimed to be Jesus, like Apollyon of Tyana and others, who went around even to India claiming to be Jesus. In other words, that's why Jesus said, all whoever came before me are thieves and robbers. But unless someone understands the history, they don't understand that to control the money is to control life. And these guys are now choking the very life. These guys, meaning the international bankers, they are throwing the world into a global economic meltdown in order to bring about the New World Order under Lucifer, which George Bush Sr. referred to, 236 times in his last year of office? So they want control of money to control life. And, John, you know, when you hear the stories of what people are going through, it's heartbreaking. And what else are they taking away? They're taking away hope, they're taking away dignity, and they're taking away the way that God ordained that every man can work, labor, and be able to provide for his family. The Apostle Paul said, any man that doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel, because there were infidels who thought that women should do everything. And I'm not, I'm saying this is that in the context that we're talking about, the international bankers claim to be literally the not only the light bringers, but the controllers of the destiny of mankind. They want the planet rid of 5.5 billion people, and that should make about 5.5 billion people rather upset.
I would think so. You know, the emails that are coming in here, and I invited them, and I continue to invite them. It's John B, JOHNB at coasttocoastam.com. They're right down the middle. There is wait a minute. There's a line right down the middle. They're either on board with what's being discussed tonight, or they're absolutely not. And there's no gray area there at all. We're coming across like a couple of, I'll get out the snakes and start rolling around and doing the ole whatever. But that's not what's going on. Here's the thing. We're going to have to take a little break here. LA Control just said so. So we're going to. But here's the thing. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains must be the truth. And it's up to the individual to determine what is true and what is not. That's all a part of that free will thing. So remain calm. This is Coast to Coast AM. We'll be back. You know, I've never been inclined to say, well, you know what, I'm sitting here in front of this microphone, and at this moment I am the most intelligent form of life in the universe, and I don't want any mention of God on my show. That's just really not me, because if we exist now, then most certainly we existed before, And more than likely, we will exist after we throw off this mortal coil. So pray continue your singular narrative, which is, it certainly is put in a singular form, and I like it, so just keep rolling. We were talking about how it's one side or the other. There is no gray area here, and it's really excellent to see these communications coming in from listeners. They come in from all over the world, they really do, and the Europeans are like, oh, we've already been through this. You have any idea how much trouble this whole religion thing has caused over here? It's like, yeah. And then as I hear you speak, Stephen, it's almost as though, these conflicts that we're experiencing here on planet Earth are also being experienced in the, for want of a better term, the heavenly realm. As a matter of fact, the first commandment is not, the first commandment is you'll have no other gods before me. He didn't say there weren't any other gods. He said you won't have any other gods before him. Yes? Where's Steve? I don't hear him.
Yeah, no, I'm right here, John. I just want to let you finish. Well, here's something that I'd like to put out there. When I write a book, there's 444 pages, and I'm just using this. After writing 10 books, I think people should understand that I absolutely do my homework. I'm aware of what organized, and I want to say this for the European listeners, I am aware, and I'm probably in more contempt for organized religion that has controlled and destroyed so many lives. But that doesn't mean the true doesn't exist, okay? When it comes to talking about the stuff I talk about, Stargates, there's three guys that really talk about it in the Christian realm, and we're the three that get hit with a lot of criticism all the time. You made the statement, John, I think it's obvious. There is a dividing line. There are those who say this stuff's a bunch of bunk, and most of Europe, by the way, has gone to the realm of God's not relevant anymore. So they're looking for something, as the country song said, they're looking for love, in my opinion, all the wrong places. If they have been so successful, look at the cluster mess-up. I'm going to be nice. The cluster mess-up that Europe is undergoing right now with Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain, Ireland, the whole EU, they were going to band together as Babylon 2. But they can't even get along now because they're all, broke. And who's controlling the money? The International Bank or Bank of International Settlements or the International Monetary Fund. What I'm saying is that they're looking for the same thing everybody else wants. Everybody else wants peace, purpose, and any right-minded person doesn't want war. They don't want war. So where does war come into it? So when let me just give some of may I do this just real quick?
Absolutely.
Some of the things I deal with, there are very few Christians out there who deal with what we deal with, okay? Myself, Tom Horn, Gary Stearman, and I'm saying this, these are the guys that I pay attention to. Those are two of the guys that get beat up and constantly attacked for taking stands. Those are two of the smartest guys in the world. Now, look, I would say this. I know the right questions to ask, but no one needs to be threatened, okay? If we're talking about aliens and UFOs, if we're talking about stargates, if we're talking about ancient animal-human hybrids, ghosts and aliens, demons, all of the transhumanism. See, the transhumanists are openly talking about creating what most people in Europe don't even want to discuss, and so now they want to throw out the God and become little gods, in my opinion. So when we're talking about the weather wars that are taking place, when people scratch their head, John, or other parts of their body, I tell them, I say, listen, why don't you take at least 1 hour out of your bias? Why don't you put your bias and your denial, and in many cases, hatred and anger towards anything you can't or you willingly choose to reject, i.e. God, and just look at this stuff. If somebody says to John and Steve, let's say we're together, John, in 5 minutes I'm going to run you over with a car. You see that red car down the road, and let's just make it fun, Ferrari Modena. I'm going to, in the quarter mile, get up to 120 miles an hour, and I'm coming straight at you guys. So we see the guy, we go, he gets in his car. You and I are standing, let's say, out on a racetrack or something. He gets in his car, he's serious, he looks at us, we get that glint in his eye, and we know, you know what? he's serious. It's time to step out of his path. I think that the basic understanding of people is they want it on their terms, and they don't understand that the terms they're looking for are the very terms of their enslavement and worse, their destruction.
Let me ask you this. What effect do we imagine that that our conversation tonight is having on people of other faiths, Muslims, for example?
Well, first of all, the realm of the jinn in Muslim theology and the end times is very present in their beliefs. I probably, for a non-Muslim, have a very good understanding from a Western approach of the jinn. I mean, even something as, like, let's talk science fiction, or even science fiction shows like I Dream of Jeannie, you know? Barbara Eden in the bottle. Where did the promise of something that had been locked up coming forth, or the words abracadabra, or 1001 Arabian Nights, or any of the if you will, the historic points of Islam in their literature and in their belief system? The thing is that what I'm trying to say is you cannot escape the supernatural. Why are the Sci-Fi Channel, they have, Ghost Hunters, International Ghost Hunters. They have all these things. Listen, ghosts, demons, and all the different creatures of the night, they've been around since antiquity. Do you remember, John, the first Conan movie? Conan,
yes.
The Barbarian, with obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Oh, yeah.
You remember when he goes into the desert and there's this beautiful, alluring woman who welcomes him into her tent? Do you remember that scene? If you don't, it's based on the Middle East, the night hag, Lilith the night hag, and people can see what we're trying to say is other faiths, all faiths, and it doesn't matter. They have a contact point with the supernatural, and all I'm doing is I'm not attacking their contact point, but I'm just saying this. Isn't it interesting that a night hag who basically lures a man to have sex and then devours him, literally eats him up as in a cannibal fashion, is that legend would be, reappearing in the desert Southwest amongst the Native Americans? And isn't it interesting that the giants, the ogres of history, whether you're in the British Isles or you're in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, this is something, the word giant is such an important understanding, because it means something other than the scale and size of man. Plenty of indication that they affected history way more than anybody gives them credit for.
Let's talk about it when we come back. Our guest tonight, Stephen Quayle. His new book, Angel Wars, Past, Present, and Future. No Flesh Left Alive. John B. Wells in with you. Coast to Coast AM will return. I'd like to thank everybody who's sending the emails in. Some of this stuff is really good, most of it. And, of course, I'll try to answer as many as possible, but they're really coming in here. And our guest tonight, Stephen Quayle, wants to take us in some various directions, one at a time, of course. That'll make things a little bit more coherent. We are going to go ahead and knock out this, what we call a floating break, so we can have a nice long run up toward the top of the hour, and then next hour we'll try and work in some of your calls too. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. John B. in with you for the duration of this show. This is Coast to Coast AM. We shall return. Stephen Quayle, take us anywhere you'd like to go, because my head is reeling and I'm ready for just about anything, and according to the communications I'm getting from our audience, they are too, so hit me.
Well, I think, John, probably the greatest example of suppressed truth that's coming out is remember when we used to be told about the moon not having any water and Mars not having any life? And people have got to see the change now in attitude of even the UFOs that are being seen, the triangular-shaped spacecraft that are ours, by the way, the TR-3, Tango Romeo 3 Bravos and 3 Charlies and TR-4s. Most people don't understand that there is a total blackout to the mainstream of what's really taking place in space, what we really know about the planets. If the former head of Skunk Works, which is a top-secret governmental development initial program that was under Lockheed basically came up with a statement, Bud Rich at his retirement dinner, if the American people knew what we've done, that we've been beyond the stars, in essence, he said they'd be furious. When people look at the ending of the space shuttles, they think, oh, woe is us. It's a smart move to save money because we're so far beyond all that. Now we know, and some of us have been saying this for 15 years, I've taken a lot of heat, especially from quote-unquote Christians. They'll basically put a cross up like I'm a vampire because that guy believes in UFOs. I don't believe in UFOs. I acknowledge them. I understand where they come from. I understand the technology, the people in the know. Look, I could know nothing except people have taught me, and I've learned to ask the right questions many times at my own expense, what really goes on behind the scenes. And what's astonishing to me when I've talked to some of the most important people, in my opinion, in the world, and these are not Luciferians, these are amazing men, they and women, they basically ask me a question. They're in a position sometimes to, how do I say this, fly some of the stuff that most people don't even know exists. They say, you ask us, Steve, why we sit back and watch us go down, yet the American people won't speak up and won't elect people that will represent them, and this is true of the Europeans listening in too, that we basically believe lies, promises that are based on nothing, but will never believe the truth that's based on something. So you can't have, in the UFO world, millions, and you go on YouTube and you'll see how many viewers there are to every specific video that's posted of triangular-shaped or whatever shaped spacecraft. You can't see the aerial phenomenon associated with UFOs, for instance, over Moscow. We're seeing China and Russia showing the double sun. We're hearing all the talk about Elenin and Planet X being the 10th planet, Nibiru, Gabriel's Fist. All of this stuff is classified under national security. Stan Deyo used to be able to give such a wonderful picture of where earthquakes would take place based on what are called sea surface temperature anomalies. He was so good at it, by the grace of God, very bright man, that the people that were feeding the data were ordered by presidential decree under George Bush to no longer make that stuff available to the public. Everything that is stuck under a national security blanket in this country, I think in Britain they call them national security letters, it's designed to keep you from knowing the truth. That's why the whole, and listen, if people want to take the official conspiracy 9/11 story that the government came up with as fact, then they're doing themselves a great disservice. But it's not only 9/11. I think 9/11 was the most in-your-face control of a staged event, if you will, false flag, covered up, and then absolutely perpetrated and kept going by those who deny the truth. When I talk to people, John, I'm sure you do too, behind the scenes, they're all saying the same thing. America's bankrupt. These are people in the know, by the way. Things get really ugly when entitlement programs are cut off. You're seeing the fighting going on in the battles right now for the different amounts of money allocated to Social Security, who will get paid, who won't get paid. States are broke and literally going broke. Shut down Minnesota. You see, one of the things I've tried to present to people is this, is they can say what they want. Obviously, there are professionals who want to make sure that people like me and others are discredited. When I have a lieutenant colonel from Northcom sitting in my office in Bozeman, Montana, that's where I live, telling me, when you go on coast to coast, and then he named off some other people, and some of them are the people that are well respected in the alternative community, our whole job is to control the flow of information and then to denigrate, to absolutely dilute, to absolutely pollute, and to character assassinate you. By the way, that guy was a Christian. And with tears in his eyes, listen, a lieutenant colonel, I'm not in the military, but that certainly isn't a private. And he said, Steve, I can't take it. And he said what they've got planned. So the planning is there. The military movements throughout the country, the helicopters, all the exercises. And I say to everybody in the military who's listening into this tonight, since when did the American people that your fathers, brothers, mothers, and others died for, since when did we become the enemy? Because something has changed in this country, something very drastic. Listen, a man who is an American, a woman who is American, a child who is an American, had an identity that was different than anything in the world. You don't put anything in front of the word American. It's not just because you're an Italian American, a Polish American, an Afro American, a Japanese American. The minute you take away and attack what it meant to be an American, you started to divide. You divided ethnos against ethnos. That means, exactly what it means, ethnicity against ethnicity. So now we're hearing, and let's look at this, John, because it involves Texas, we're hearing that American guns are being shipped to Mexico and used by the drug gangs. Now we're hearing that the very people that control the guns in this country are responsible for firearms up to 30,000. These are full automatic weapons. I'm a gun guy. I wish the press would learn to use the correct terms and quit using the word assault rifle. The point is that when you've got the head of the ATF having to secretly testify before Congress, being threatened with everything he's being threatened from the highest law enforcement in the land, we are a nation no longer of laws. We are a nation ruled by a hidden hand that wants the American population disarmed.
Well, you know what, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing is, in my info, I've received 2 or 3 pieces of information from undisclosable sources that indicate that those weapons actually were manufactured here, and they're AKs. They're Kalashnikov rifles, and I'm wondering, why are we producing Kalashnikov rifles here and then having the ATF oversee their transport south?
Well, the answer to that is the destabilization of the United States of America. Years ago, when I first started on talk radio, we were getting reports, and for the record, that was, I think, 15 years ago, John. The nice thing about talk radio is that you have had, I have had, George, others, Art, everybody who's been on talk radio has had we've had relationships with people, or we've had communication with people that really were seeing things in real time and telling us. The problem is like you started out earlier in the show tonight, whether people believe it or not isn't the issue. Whether if it's happening, it's happening. And in those days, there were entire Chinese shipments of military heavy weapons coming in to the gangs on the West Coast. So why is our southern border wide open? I think it was, 40 or 42 people killed in the gunfights between the Mexican government and the drug gangs yesterday. 42 people. If you remember, ladies and gentlemen, we hear reports of coming from Afghanistan and the farthest parts of the earth that were involved in war, and that's a huge number, yet it's happening on the border. It's no longer safe in some border towns, and yet where is the disconnect? And by the way, AK-47s, 7.62 by 39, that is a light weapon. What I'm telling you is that the heavy weapons are flowing into Mexico. I mean, we're talking anti-tank weapons. We are talking shoulder-fired missiles. We're talking stuff that would blow most people's mind, and it filters through the gangs. So why is it that we'll send tens of thousands of U.S. troops who put their life on the line overseas for, quote, our interests, yet somehow the Border Patrol is licensed or relegated to having 9mm handguns and maybe a 12-gauge shotgun, and then there are their rules of engagement, and they're being outgunned. So I think the thing is that people have to understand the reason the southern border is open is because it is designed to be open, again, for the destruction of the United States of America. Why do we have the greatest tornadoes in history clustering and the electromagnetic signature of weather warfare indicating 2 days before that it's going to hit, and yet we're hearing that the President of the United States is out golfing, or it's been a tough week, and then we hear the fact that all of these natural, and I say that with tongue-in-cheek, John, I believe these are man-made weather warfare incidents designed to destroy the growing capability of this country, designed to destroy the farm base of this country. And again, I've done my homework. If people don't understand that there are documents that already claim, and the top men in the world, whether it's Defense Secretary Cohen or Zbigniew Brzezinski, under the respective regimes they operate under, already admit to all this stuff, the scientists that developed it admit to it, then I got news for you. The arguments, well, I don't believe that. Their belief mean nothing. Seeing is believing, and when you see the devastation taking place in the Midwest and the lackadaisical approach of dealing with it, you've got to understand that there is a reason. You only focus on stupid stuff like murder trials and what new celebrities having what new affair to keep the people occupied. Americans have lost their critical thinking skills. It's, in my opinion, related directly to public education, and it's all part, I'll say it, I don't care. It's all part of the Communist Manifesto. And communism is, listen, socialism is not a good thing. We are seeing now the full implementation of godless rebellion and the implementation of the one world government. And I want to say to people, if they think the people who are screwing us up on purpose can provide us a better future, boy, are you deceived.
That's for sure. You know, most people do not realize that socialism is nothing but communism light. The only difference that I'm able to discern is that, at least in a socialistic society as opposed to a communistic society, you can own private property, but that's about it.
Well, it's just like Animal Farm. All of us animals are equal, but some are just more equal. If you look at the ruling party of any communist nation, it doesn't matter, and the leaders, they live fat off the hog or they live off the fat of the lawn, they eat the fatted calf, and yet people starve. Isn't that what we're seeing in the imperial presidency? Come on, when our president goes overseas and takes an entourage that exceeds anything in the history of the United States, both in cost and expense, and when you see the profligate, golf games and everything else, listen, I'm not down on a guy taking a day off, but I am down on the statement that when someone who's married to him says he never takes a day off. The point is look, it's almost like he was wound up and said, do the best job you can. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking politically. For the record, George Bush was probably one of the greatest spenders, and I am absolutely not a Bush fan, okay? This is trans-political. This ascends the politics. John, it's like I tell people, they say, well, what do you think of the Republican-Democrat, positions? I say, listen, it's just one street, and one's a prostitute working on the left side of the street, one's a prostitute working the right side of the street, and when the job is done, they've all got their money, and all their Johns are left penniless and absolutely pillaged, and I think that's what's going on. People say, then what's the answer? Here's the answer. The answer is for people personally to take responsibility. I go crazy when people say, well, somebody ought to do something, or blah, 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 blah. Most people in this country have become apathetic, indifferent, and non-caring, and especially the evangelical Christians. They're singing the sweet by and by, while the sweet now and now basically cooks their goose. People have got to recognize that if they got a voice, they better use it, because if they don't use their voice and use common sense reason and look at a cause and effect, then we are beyond help. And in my opinion, outside of repentance on the level of Nineveh, we're already done. Even the Illuminati guys who contact me by email, they laugh and they say, Steve, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your breath. We got it. It's in the bag, pal. And I mean, that's the kind of emails I get, plus the other ones I can't quote on the air. But the thing is that coupled in with those emails are more people saying, thank you. We knew something was wrong. I'm getting those right now. They're saying, for me, Steve, to thank you, John, because you're one of the few guys that takes a stand for what he believes.
You might as well, because, you got to check out of here sometime, so you might as well stand for something while you're here.
That's what I loved. We only had one conversation, as a matter of fact, And that's what I loved about you is obviously, you know, in your world, in your realm, you made a statement to me that very few people make, and that's, hey, I know what God has done in my life. See, the man with the testimony of supernatural intervention in his life isn't at the mercy of the man who's the critic. You know? It's just not. You know what you believe, and you're persuaded.
Well, you know, and I'm not going to stand between somebody and a good idea, but I just don't, you know, here's the problem. People use this word religion. Doesn't religion just mean something that is done regularly? It has nothing to do with, it doesn't, well, it's not that it has nothing to do with it. It doesn't have everything to do with your spiritual orientation. It's just something you can say that you ride your bicycle religiously every day. It doesn't mean you do it while you're in prayer. And, you know, we've got like I say, these emails keep rolling in and they're one side or the other. Let me ask you something, though. Let's say this is all contrived to destroy our country, which was once our nation, but it's a country. I thought I lived in a city, and then later on I found out it's a market, actually. After this country is in chaos, after martial law is, let's say the economic situation deteriorates to the point where all these flash mobs and all this stuff, and I want to get to that after a break that we've got coming up here in a few minutes. Another break. But what's causing these flash mobs? Well, what's causing this accelerating violence, mindless accelerating violence? And if it has been put in motion to bring about the destruction of the country, well, what happens then? I mean, what's the point?
Well, the point is the destruction of the country.
Is that the whole thing? Just
yeah. Listen, the United States is to be divided up in 10 regions. Okay, and they actually, you can go on and look up 10 FEMA regions. You remember this: united we stand, divided we fall.
Yep.
Notice the statement. United, obviously, United States. Divided. The plan is to divide the United States. The plan is to incite rebellion. You know, it's a Hegelian dialectic. Hegelian dialectic is simply this. You create the problem, you provide the solution, and by providing the solution, you bring about the desired result. No clearer Hegelian poster child could be defined in the Patriot Act. Entities in our government, and by the way, I've had Steve Pichinik on my show, Deputy Undersecretary of State, and one of the most well-connected men in the world, Tom Clancy's former partner, author, brilliant man, and he the minute he goes on any talk radio, you, me, Alex, whoever, he immediately has some of the biggest guns in the world come out and address the fact that somebody who was an insider would say that it was an inside job. So they create the problem. Now we've got terrorists. Now we've got to basically have all these issues. And meanwhile, the people say, yeah, I want to be safe. And freedom is an expensive proposition. It also is a danger zone. But again, what they did is they made the American people the enemy, and they're allowing the enemies to have unbridled access to the country for its destruction.
We're going to carry on with this conversation, and on the other side of the top of the hour, as we say in the biz, we're going to get into the reasons behind this and possibly some countermeasures. Thank you for listening tonight. Okay. In our conversation with Stephen Quayle tonight, we have touched on many things, and thank you very much, each and every one of you, whether for or against anything that's being discussed on this program tonight. It is your prerogative, and we welcome it, because otherwise we really don't know what your reaction is, do we? We can only guess at it. I have a question here, and the question is, if destiny doesn't exist, then why is truth always stranger than fiction? And it is strange, the things that are happening in America. When Stephen and I were kids, because I'm not in my 30s, I'm past that, one murder would shock an entire country. The entire country, our country. Now, there seems to be quite a lot of it on far too many corners and streets and stores and homes throughout our nation. Why the flash mobs that have turned into flash robs? Are they orchestrated? is the turmoil in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya, in Egypt, and elsewhere? Is that all orchestrated? What about Islam's fifth column? Is it protected in some way? And what is the end game? And then finally, we'll get to what we're about to morph into as time goes by, and if the forces of darkness get their way. Please stay with us for this final hour with Stephen Quayle, our guest tonight on Coast to Coast AM. John B. Wilson with you tonight. Stephen Quayle, this is absolutely amazing. We spoke on the phone about all this craziness that's sweeping the nation. I've resisted discussing anything of a personal nature. I'm tempted to do it sometimes, and then I pull back from it. But somebody very near and dear to me was subjected to a mindless and brutal attack, and I certainly hope the city of Austin will clean up their streets a little bit and get things together. Otherwise, I may just have to come down there and talk to them. But what's going on with these flash robs? All this stuff that's supposedly orchestrated over these social networking sites, Facebook and Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Supposedly the whole Middle East has been set on fire because of Facebook and Twitter. I'm not buying it, but I understand that some of the same orchestration of violence may be actually contrived, and it's not accidental or spontaneous at all. You know, once you start seeing a trend, well, it starts to look like it was designed rather than just some spontaneous, whoa, look at this. This is an anomaly. It's like, no, it's no more an anomaly than the war on terror or the war on drugs, both of them failures.
Well, let's take Europe first, John, if we may. Europe went off almost on cue, simultaneously and instantaneously, and the Middle East also. Now, all you got to understand is the United States foreign policy in the Middle East to define that obviously we overthrew Mubarak, and the rage that went on behind the scenes of the betrayal of the Egyptian government by our president and by our intelligence agency. I think what you need to understand is the social network sites were set up, not originally envisioned maybe by them, but funded by them in all their investments through their banking contacts. When you're dealing with the word terrorism, and people have to broaden their understanding of terrorism. For a lot of years, I wrote about terrorism, and again, my critics don't take the time to read some of the stuff I write, so I just say, when they've done what I've done, I'll listen to them. But the point is that terrorism is big business. When you want to upset a nation, you have obviously your people in country. You basically can throw a lot of money to buy a lot of allegiance. You develop relationships, and what the social networks have done has been to give instantaneous communication between the controllers and the people they control, the handlers and the operatives they basically position. So this thing is designed first and foremost in the Middle East to set up the general cataclysmic nation, or nature, not nation, but in the nations, the global chaos that the Illuminati demands, because their Latin obviously speaks for itself. Order out of chaos. What that literally means is the old belief systems, the old financial systems, the old every way that has been history to this point must be changed into the new global good, and I say that with tongue-in-cheek. Let's call it the global bad, that the Luciferians themselves basically see a world without God, and so all the Europeans that are emailing you or emailing me, look at what you've got. You are basically a secular continent. Look at what we've become in the United States. We've become not so much a secular, but an occult nation. Occult just meaning hidden. So the hidden hand of the intelligence agencies and the different, what I would call, pogroms to overthrow the existing power structures of the Middle East countries are very much orchestrated. And until you understand, and I understand, that these people make Dr. Evil look like the Three Stooges, and I mean that obviously he was a fictional character, but when you see that world domination, destruction, and control is the euphoria sought by those who have total human contempt for life, which, again, going back to my book Angel Wars, the basis of Angel Wars is to tell people this is what's going on behind the scenes. Look where it's headed. So I want to make this, and I think I said this to you in our first conversation, John, there is a supernatural evil hierarchy controlling the underlings, which are an earthly hierarchy, who have willingly given their power unto the beast, who have yielded that which God created them with. They have yielded, given their power over to Satan. And so it's why do people welcome demon possession? Because they believe they're going to get power, not knowing that that power they yield to will ultimately consume and destroy them. So whether it's Twitter, Facebook, any of those social network sites, the point is that it is an instantaneous communication method to activate cells, groups, or organizations to what the cells, groups, and organizations have been paid, prompted, and educated to believe. And so that's what's going on. It's going on in this country, yet to go on in this country. And flash mobs, I mean, how better can you communicate? You instantly text message somebody and say, meet us at McDonald's, we're going to rumble, or whatever the place might be. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, for instance, there have been cases where 50, 60 youth decide they want to beat up somebody. Or if you've seen anybody seen the McDonald's beating tapes on YouTube, I mean, we're talking brutality. How about police breaking into the home in Arizona of a Marine, a veteran, and the guy's murdered in his own home? And it wasn't even, it was baseless, it was senseless. Or kids tasered to death. Or people who are exercising their First Amendment right in Quartzsite, Arizona, being physically hauled out of the town hall meeting. This is by design. I guess the only answer I can give you, John, is it's all by design. The global chaos must come. Everything that has been must be destroyed. So from the ashes of the phoenix in this case being the old world civilization based on, obviously, the acknowledgement of God, the acknowledgement of moral accountability. So you get rid of all morals, you've got no accountability. It's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And if the PETA, the people for the ethical treatment of animals, don't get what's in store for animals, they better start looking into this whole thing that I'm talking about. By the way, I'm getting emails, if I might just say this. My book is not available on Amazon or any of the bookstores. You can order it by calling my store at 406-586-4840. That's 406-586-4840. And I'm just getting emails, John, so I'm having to get that out. Or you can go online and order it. But
please do. It's a fabulous book, Stephen. It really is.
Well, I think what it does is it answers a lot of questions. And by the way, I think what I can do that a lot of people fail to do is put it in the bigger context of how this stuff relates. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yes, I would. And you know what? I fancy myself a rational man. I mean, I'm human, so believe me, I'm fraught with flaws. But here's the thing. I'm almost tempted to say that as one rational man to another, are you asking me to believe that people willingly succumb to a worship of Satan and these people are in high places? I know we're discussing this, and I think the answer is yes, but I just need to hear you say it again, because something like this to me is unimaginable. It's just ridiculous. Why would you do such a thing? Because you're promised some great reward? Doesn't everybody know that, well, that Satan screws you over in the end after he enables you to cause a bunch of damage, then he bites you? I mean, that's what I've observed.
You have to say, my answer is yes, and I build that case historically. I build it on myths and legends. I build it on oral tradition. I build it on technology. Look, even the transhumanists that are some of the smartest men in the world, okay, and women, they're making it clear. For instance, Ray Kurzweil, a wonderful man, brilliant man. I mean, but when you talk about age and you talk about spiritual machines, and then I got to tell you, I don't know, have you seen the new Transformer movie?
I have not seen it. I've seen the trailers, though.
Yeah,
it's pretty serious.
It's astonishing. It's so well done, okay? This one is so good. But basically, you have spiritual machines. You have and I got to tell you something. It is probably, in my opinion, by nature, I have a degree in film and television, motion picture, still photography, anthropology, minors in that, and art history. But I got to tell you, that's a fabulous book. A fabulous book. It's a fabulous presentation of what I talk about in my book. The absolute, the portrayal of good and bad. Okay, you've got good and bad machines battling with moral consequences and moral decisions and choices. It is so up to date and so timely. like I said, in my opinion, it's one of the best movies I've ever seen, simply because I understand what is being portrayed in the movie. And by the way, it is marvelously. Michael Bay did probably the best job of directing, in my opinion, of any movie I've seen in a long time. And I had to take history of the cinema classes until I could recall everything from Birth of a Nation forward. So what we're seeing is the personification of the spiritual realm, John. And see, that's what most people can't understand. They cannot understand the sinister nature of the war that's against them. So since they don't understand it, they dismiss it and are destroyed by it.
Understood. Well, there's another one out there that touches on something I'd like to. Let's just go. I don't call it ADD. I call it MAC. That's multiple attention capability. So let's do that.
You're a prince of a man to suggest that. I'm going to tell my wife that.
The Battle LA. I saw that recently, and of course the weapon is attached to the invader's arm. Do you, as these genetic and these human modifications take place in future, however long that'll be, 10 years, 20 years is a drop in the bucket. I know and you know that everything that we know of as being contemporary technology is actually about 30 years behind what actually exists. In fact, my mother said, John, I saw a triangular-shaped craft, didn't make any noise at all. It was just following this highway. And I said, oh, Mom, come on. And this was back in the 70s. And but it was headed right toward a well-known Air Force base. And moving absolutely soundlessly. So I'm jumping around here, but it's like, is that what's in the future? Are we talking about androgynous creatures that have weapons built into them that are cloned, much like the things that are taking place with the chicken that we eat in some cases?
Well, yes, and it's fascinating you would bring that up because let me share this. In the world of special operations, and most people don't understand this, and this was told to me by people in that realm. One of the gentlemen who I respect and admire the most in my life made a statement to me. He said, Steve, in my world, things do go bump in the night, but he said, we know how to bump back. Over the years that we were friends, and we no longer talk, not because we're not friends, but just because of the nature of who he is and his position in the military and stuff. The thing that was fascinating to me, when he would talk about the weapons, may I give you what a four-star general said?
Sure, absolutely.
The weapons are thousands of years in advance because all we do is try and control the technology that existed in the past. This is something that most people don't understand. Let's take the nation of India. They have a history in the Mahabharata and a lot of their Vedic texts of wars that are absolutely right out of the future. Zacharias Sitchin wrote a lot about wars between God and men, but the ancient Vimana, the flying machines, the high-energy weapons, some of their statements, weapons with the power of 10,000 suns. We're talking about ancient technology that is so far advanced, and in a lot of ways it's nothing more than angel technology, because this is what's hard for people to understand. They accept Hollywood's demons as being the brilliance of fallen angels. Fallen angels don't usually possess human beings. A demon is a disembodied spirit. The Book of Giants and the Book of Enoch teach that the demons were the spirits of the giants who were killed. So they have supernatural intelligence, they have supernatural understanding. Believe me, they know history, and they can quote the Bible better than most pastors, I'd say probably than any pastor, because they know what's in it. But the thing that I want people to understand is this. To my knowledge, and I'm saying this, to my knowledge, I've read thousands of works or quotations from them. That's probably even an underestimation. But to my knowledge, there's nothing that has laid it out like I've laid it out in Angel Wars. Because how does all this stuff fit in? And by the way, I want to make this claim. Most evangelical Christians will not receive what I've written in my book. So for people to be easier, I'd say anybody who genuinely wants to know about ancient civilizations, about giants, about fallen angels, mythology, and how it all relates to the destruction of all human life and how it's being implemented would do well. This is an exercise in a primer. It's kind of like, I would say, a life assurance policy. It helps to deal with the fear. Now, I would bet your mother wouldn't be afraid if she saw another TR-3 because she's already seen one. You know, the triangular-shaped aircraft. They're silent, they can hover, and they can cloak, just like the Klingons. And John, a good exercise is for people to study the history of science fiction. The intelligence community learned after Roswell that by putting things into science fiction and in putting into the genre of science fiction films, they could absolutely control the information of anything that might leak by just passing off, oh, that's just science fiction. Yeah, they just saw that in the movie. It was a brilliant mind control and population control mechanism for the flow of information.
Well, you know, the former CIA director asserts that the U.S. may seriously want to consider creating a new Internet infrastructure to reduce the threat of cyber attacks, or maybe it's just to shut down the enhanced communication between the citizens. I mean, what would happen if the whole net went down and we couldn't, I mean, everything runs over it. The telephones, the cell phone. Isn't it interesting, no matter what cell phone carrier you have, it's the same voice that tells you all circuits are busy now. Now, I wonder why that is.
Well, first of all, it will happen. The Bilderbergers in their latest meeting, that was their number one concern, that people are finding out too much information. So I would encourage everyone, the most important things that they found on the Internet, to make hard copies. It will go down under martial law. And let me just spell this out for people. The Internet will go down. The cell phones will cease to operate. Anybody who's been in an area where the cell phones have been interrupted during a natural disaster. By the way, on my website, stevequayle.com, STEVEQUAYLE.com, I encourage everyone who's concerned with that to get a satellite phone, because the satellite phones will stay up as the last line of communication. A satellite phone, you don't need to go through any land-based switching station. In other words, if I want to call you, John, I place a call to the satellite goes directly to your phone, and I went and met with the people that are the largest providers of satellite phones in the world, and they do a marvelous job. And there's a box on my website. They go and check that out. But what happens when information ceases? Then your actions. Then in my mode, I don't know if you've ever gone in this mode, but because I spend so much time researching, I actually go through withdrawal. And I think what people will do is go through withdrawal. Now let's add this. People who are in social networks, who are on Prozac, or who are on any type of maintenance drugs, and then they can't make a call, they can't control their anxiety, anti-anxiety medication, excuse me, that's all by design.
You know, it's interesting, when you and I were talking on the phone the other day, you'd called me on my mobile, and that was an interesting phenomenon, when all of a sudden I've answered Steve's call on my handset, and yet the telephone on my hands-free is still ringing. We're going to come back and talk with Stephen Quayle some more. And let's discuss countermeasures for our protection. Or shall we just write it down like Slim Pickens wrote the A-bomb down in Dr. Strangelove? Coast to Coast AM will return. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and staying up so late. It's not as late in some parts of the world, and in fact, it's tomorrow in some parts of the world, but thanks for being with us, and thanks for all your emails, kind and controversial as well. We're going to take this last break, and then from the other side of it, up to the top of the hour, we'll take some of your calls and cover a couple of other salient points. And again, thank you for being with us on this edition of Coast to Coast AM. We shall return. Stephen Quayle, author of his latest book, Angel Wars, Past, Present, and Future, No Flesh Left Alive? Maybe not, because if they hit us with everything that they can hit us with, it will be very much like, it's just a movie. I know it's just a movie, but it's a good story. It'll be just like Battle L.A. It really will. The stuff that's out there now is we can't grab our pitchforks and our brooms and our shovels and our torches and march to the palace to force the king to abdicate. That's not going to happen. They'll have their sound guns up. They'll have their heat shields up. They'll have shock troops all over the place. We won't get anywhere near them. So what I want to discuss with you and with Stephen Quayle is, do we write it down until it goes off and then see what's on the other side, or are there some countermeasures we can take, and what are they? And I want to get to those just as soon as we come back, and we're going to take your calls. Thanks very much for hanging in there as long as you have. You are true troopers, and not of the storm variety. We shall return on Coast to Coast here. All right, wait a minute. So I told you I'd bollocks it up. Stephen, we're back. I think my brain's winding down. I know. I've run out of coffee. That's what it is. I need an energy drink, and then it'll really be a disaster.
Well, I got to tell you, I just run on quadruple A adrenaline, so I don't need coffee. I need something to sometimes settle me down, and I thank those of you who have sent me emails telling me to slow down. I'm just grateful that people listen. I want to just share this for the last time, John. My books are not available. I'm